Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm a trauma therapist, and I started this YouTube channel to connect and to educate those who identify as suffering from complex PTSD or PTSD. Those of you who may already be in therapy, or maybe you're considering on reaching out for help. I started this channel just to educate and to give some insights on CPTSD and cover some common themes, common topics, and also ways to help on this channel as well. So if you're new here, welcome, drop a like or follow if this is the type of content you're looking for. So let me dive straight into today's topic. Today in this video, I want to cover the main differences between PTSD and complex PTSD. I've done some shorter videos on some aspects of this, but I wanted to give a more fleshed out dedicated video to these differences. So a lot of people might be wondering, what is the differences between it? The most obvious one is that there's one letter difference between them, PTSD and complex PTSD. There's obviously a C at the beginning. The C part will help differentiate the experiences between the two and why these differences are important on distinguishing from PTSD and complex PTSD. The first main substantial difference between the two is how flashbacks are experienced. So I'll talk about PTSD first. So I'll use a very common example that a lot of people can identify to help make the differentiation. If we're talking about PTSD, the first thing that people will think about is often veterans, war veterans, people who have come back from war, from battle. It's easy for us to picture or understand the flashbacks that happen in those types of circumstances. So war veteran coming back, he may be experiencing visual flashbacks. He may be experiencing in his day-to-day life things that trigger him, that trigger a visual flashback where he's been taken back to the scenes, the visual imagery of very horrific things that that person has been through in war, the horrors of war. We can all imagine or don't want to imagine what that entails. But here the flashbacks are very visual. They obviously have a very awful impact on a person, but it's as if they're visually being taken back to those things that they witnessed and causing that traumatic stress response in them. So with PTSD, the flashback is usually got a visual component to it. We're kind of seeing it in our mind. We're being taken back to the visual imagery of what happened. With complex PTSD, the flashbacks are experienced differently. So they still experience flashbacks, but they have less of a visual component in their mind being taken back to a visual experience. Although it can happen with complex PTSD, what happens more often than not is what they call an emotional flashback, and I have done a separate shorter video about this. What this means is, for an emotional flashback, it's if you imagine a child. Complex PTSD usually stems from childhood trauma. So things are experienced when you're very little. That childhood trauma can be in the form of physical abuse, mental or emotional abuse, being neglected, not being taken care of, perhaps being bullied by your family. So if you're going through those sorts of things as a child, this is extremely traumatic, and this is the blueprint for complex post-traumatic stress disorder in childhood. And the differences in the types of flashbacks is, if you're a child going through that, you will feel very unwanted, very neglected, very abandoned, very helpless, hopeless, depressed, isolated, all these sorts of feelings. And a child can grow up to be an adult, but those feelings still remain, they still linger. And what often will happen is they'll be in an ordinary, sometimes obviously in a very stressful situation, but a situation can trigger those strong emotional responses that were previously really unbearable and we couldn't process properly at the time. And so that emotional reaction comes out, particularly those feelings that we felt strongest when we were traumatized or neglected as a child. So for example, you might be an adult and you might experience feelings of helplessness or hopelessness around a situation in work. It might be your boss who's behaving in a certain way and you may feel very helpless or angry that you can't change them, you can't change their behaviour, or you're trying to communicate a certain thing. or it could be a significant relationship in your life, a partner or friendship, and you could be feeling very frustrated and overwhelmed with the fact that they aren't changing, their behaviour isn't changing, there's something extremely triggering about the situation. And the difference between complex PTSD and PTSD in this scenario is the emotional flashback will arise with those similar feelings that have been triggered from the past. But the key difference is that when that is happening, it does not feel like a memory when it is happening. It just feels like an emotion that's happening in the moment. And this is really key, and I probably will be given a lot longer videos on this topic. But the differentiation is you're not taken back to a visual of something physically that happened in your childhood. It's the emotional response that's been buried and lingering there is being triggered in that moment, and it does not feel like a memory being recalled, which is often why it can feel extremely confusing and upsetting to people with complex PTSD. I hear it a lot of people feeling like they're crazy, they don't understand the types of reactions they're having, they feel out of control, like they're losing their mind. And when this happens, we lose our rational mind, our wise mind that can rationalise these things. When we're triggered and having an emotional flashback, that part of our brain shuts off. We don't have access to it. And this is what can later lead to a lot of shame for people who are having emotional flashbacks and perhaps don't realise that that's what's happening, is later they feel like their emotional reaction didn't make sense, it was very out of proportion, or felt like they couldn't help themselves, they were just reacting and attacking. And it's because of that emotional flashback that's happening without a visual component, so it doesn't feel like a memory reaction. What this might often look like is you frequently feeling like you're very helpless and hopeless. You feel like there's nothing you can do to change the things in your life, change your world, or have any impact on it. You can feel very, very small, like there's nothing that you can do that has any impact on things. You feel very powerless. The second characteristic which differentiates the two is having a very, what you call a faulty response to stress. So most of us on some level are aware of the fight-flight response and the different behaviours or reactions that those entail. So I'm going to give a little bit more insight into the specific automatic nervous system reactions and how those practically look in an adult's life, not just the physical symptom side of it. I'm not going to cover this in this video, but more the types of behaviour that you're more prone to engaging with. And it's important for me to make a disclaimer at the beginning that for some people it can be common to identify with more than one. So if you identify with more than one, don't panic. It doesn't mean that you are forever broken or this can't be helped. It can be quite common actually for people to identify with more than one of these types of responses to stress or threat. So everyone's heard of the fight response in terms of your nervous system, but how this looks with complex PTSD in an adult, it's when you favour launching into confrontation as part of your fight response. When you perceive a threat, confrontation or stress in some kind of way, your more automatic response is to confront about it. So for this reason, you may be a person that finds yourself frequently arguing with people, even people that you really care about or feel quite attached to or are hoping to develop a close relationship with. You might often find yourself regretting fights that you've had because in the moment you feel pulled into that fight response where you're maybe scrutinising or confronting in some kind of way what the person is saying or doing, and this can make you feel like your relationships are kind of breaking down. Understandably, people kind of take a step back or feel very defensive about it. They might engage with a fight with you because they're feeling attacked in that sort of way. Can't comment on the specifics of it because this is obviously a general stressful event, but in terms of the fight response, it's not about who's right or wrong in the situation, but more that you're prone to confronting people when you have that surge of adrenaline in you. The freeze response, however, looks very, very different when compared to the fight response in an adult. So the freeze response, how that looks for your behaviour if you favour freeze, is more that you kind of quickly realise that resistance is futile. That's kind of the feeling that you experience, or the narrative that you have. And so you're more likely to kind of give up and maybe even dissociate in some kind of way from the situation. It might be actually removing yourself, but more often than not, the dissociation is kind of a collapse. It almost might feel like give up and take it sort of approach. If you favour that, you maybe at the slightest sign of stress, confrontation, or something like that, you kind of collapse more. It might not physically see a collapse on the outside, but more your approach, your energy, your intention is more about like, okay, give up. Resistance is futile, just let it happen, and I will dissociate whilst that is happening. The fawn response is often very misunderstood with complex PTSD, but this is the most practical, straightforward way to identify it in your life if you're a person that favours the fawn response. So when under pressure or confrontation or stress, the fawn response is more a people-pleasing behaviour. So your way of dealing with the stress or overactivation is to try and appease and please the person in order to avoid any potential hurt or harm. The flight response is simpler in some ways to identify. Whenever you are under stress or perceived confrontation, you will run away or remove yourself from the situation. This will often be physically, but sometimes if we are unable to do this physically, like when you're a child, it is more of a mental fleeing and dissociation from it. But typically when you're an adult, you feel more empowered to actually physically remove yourself from the situation. This is more under the flight response. It's important to highlight that there's no shame or criticism for any of these types of responses. They are automatic survival responses, and they've been developed to help you get through and survive a horrific childhood. And so you've come to rely on these protective measures. All of them are a form of protective measure to help you survive, albeit for some of you it might feel like you barely survived it. So these responses are not anything to be ashamed of if you identify with one or more than one of these. This is your brain's natural protection response to keep you safe and to disconnect from the threat in some kind of way, even if it means hitting it head on with hyperactivity. It is a way to try and deal with the trauma in a safe way. What this means for you though, as this develops throughout your childhood, you become an adult where these defence structures become very entrenched and even more elaborated in you as a person. They are not your personality, they are a way to deal with stress or being very, very activated in some kind of way when you're an adult. But what it will often feel like for you if you're experiencing this is it can feel like you have a very limited window of options on how to deal with day-to-day life. Anytime things feel that they're getting too much or there's a sense of threat or confrontation, it can feel like this is a very automatic way that feels out of your control, that you're responding to it, and it feels incredibly hard to sit with it or to try and rationalise a different way to approach it. You always seem to be going into one of these patterns. With all of these different types of responses, what I would offer you, alongside the sort of education about what they look like and what they mean, is to take a step back and to examine how you spend your day-to-day existence, but also your free time, because how we spend our time, the type of action or inaction that we take, can sometimes actually be a very helpful mirror in us spotting or understanding parts of ourselves that maybe we haven't shone the torchlight of awareness on quite yet. So when we're thinking about the different types of responses, what I often explore or share with clients is being aware of how they are engaging in certain behaviours and to what extent they are doing that with. So for example, things like video games. Video games aren't inherently bad. I'm not saying that people shouldn't be playing video games, but the fight or freeze response can often be captured as an undertone to how we are living our day-to-day. So feeling like we are often daydreaming or very, very lost in fantasy. We are losing ourselves in a video game. We are sort of disassociating from real life and immersing ourselves in another reality. Video games are a very popular way to do that, obviously TV and movies as well. Now, these in themselves are harmless when they're done in a moderate way, but sometimes under the light of trauma, how we engage in these behaviours can often be insightful as a way that we have learned to cope with day-to-day life in the past and how we've carried that through as an adult. So it's often very common to see children who have been traumatised become very engrossed and attached to video games because their real life is a horror and they're physically unable to do anything about that as a child. They can't overpower or rationalise with an irrational, traumatising adult. And so films or video games offer a form of escape. And that in itself can be one of those types of responses. You could have an argument on it being any of them really. But thinking about those sorts of things as an adult, if you are feeling like you're unable to work, unable to perform or move, perform simple tasks, if you feel engrossed in your own daydreams or kind of glued to the TV for most of the day or most of your free time in a way that it's maybe inhibiting you looking after yourself in different ways with your diet or your movement or connection in some kind of way. Again, this isn't to say that we shouldn't be watching TV or playing video games. It's more just being aware of, is this a crutch or a way of living that I am leaning on and feeling very reliant on? And why might that be? For some of you, complex trauma might be part of that answer. And certainly if you feel that you identify with feeling very helpless and lost day to day, this can show up in this way. The final characteristic that I'm going to go into, which differentiates PTSD and complex PTSD, is your experience of attunement and how you pick up on the subtleties of other people's behaviours, their body language, their energy, for lack of a better term, their facial expression, and that sort of constant awareness and scanning of other people in every single social interaction that you have. So for us to grow up as healthy adults that integrate with society, this is a necessary skill that we need. We need to be able to attune into different environments so that we can fit in, so that we can function and we can tailor ourselves as we see fit. So for example, most of us behave differently in a work environment compared to how we behave in our home environment. This is part of normal life. If you are an adult that as a child you experienced a traumatic upbringing, it was a necessary habit and actual skill that you had to develop to become acutely aware and attuned to the mood and the movements of your caregivers. So you become very hyper-focused and aware on kind of a conscious and unconscious level of every type of small, like facial movements that they make that indicate what they're thinking or what they're feeling. You can even be aware of what type of mood they're in from a different room. You become an expert, really, at a very young age on being able to read someone, and this plays at your advantage because it means that you are giving yourself an advantage to adapt in a way that buys you time, buys you space to not aggravate the parent or the person in question who is experienced as a very traumatic person to be around. If you're doing this as a child, this skill being developed, it's developed at a much quicker rate than children who are not in this environment, and it is incredibly exhausting and taxing for a child to be doing this, to be constantly scanning and aware of every single micro movement so that you have an advantage of knowing a heads up. If that parent is angry or in a bad mood, you're going to keep yourself to yourself or give a particular type of response that helps you adapt to try and get away from the danger and to protect yourself. So being able to read the cues, the movement, being able to read other people gives you an incredible advantage of doing that. So as an adult, this will be a skill, like a muscle that you have developed through repetition over and over and over and over again, that it probably will bring you some benefits in your life. You're probably a very likable person, you're very attuned to other people's emotions. This may even help your relationships, your work relationships, your personal relationships. But when it comes to your own identity, your own boundaries, your own wants and needs, this is where you fall flat, because you have hyper developed, because it was a necessity when you were growing up, you've hyper developed your capacity and awareness of others, but not very attuned and aware of what you need, what you feel. And even if you do get glimpses of what that is, you fall flat or fail or find it incredibly difficult to actually ask for these things, verbalize them, place boundaries where they need to be placed. And so the priority is often given to other people because that's what you're used to hyper attuning to, and not toward yourself. So with that, what that means for you, whether it's inside or outside of therapy, is developing more of a balance between those priorities, that survival mechanism that has developed for you to come out of that survival mode. And this is done somatically, emotionally, and rationally. It is on all levels of the body, so that you can actually be able to tune in more to your own feelings, your own experiences, be able to place those boundaries and look after and prioritise yourself. And so with that, I think I will wrap this video up. If you have made it this far, thank you very much for staying and watching. Please feel free to leave a comment down below of suggestions on what to make videos about, or to share your own experience if you identify with anything that's been said in this video. I'm very excited for upcoming videos I'll be making on this channel. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you next time.